Hello again. Welcome and thank you for watching. Let's begin our next subject. The field of science in our modern world has taken amazing steps forward since the beginning of the 20th or previous century. The scientific advancements just in the fields of medicine and electronics are almost mind-boggling in their scope, and there doesn't seem to be any let-up in the foreseeable future. Consider personal computers and cell phones and the impact that they've already had on our society. Look also at what's happened so far with the Internet. Who can say what the years ahead may hold for us in these areas of high technology and scientific endeavor? On the other side of the coin, however, if our society of today has a fault, and it certainly does, it's the fact that science generally cannot, by its own rules, admit to the existence of those things which it cannot somehow measure or conclusively prove in some manner, usually in the laboratory or through mathematics. These proofs must be done either through experiments which have results that can be reproduced in the lab again and again, or, as I said, by mathematics or some other means which somehow provides proof to the satisfaction of the scientific community. Those areas of investigation where proof does not always come so quickly or so easily often involve things which science today does not yet fully understand. Sadly, this can exclude a great deal, especially regarding spiritual matters. For too many scientists, it may even exclude God. The author remembers, or the speaker, I remember a sad occasion many years ago when a student in one of the countries that then discouraged belief in God made a statement that essentially asked, "Why do you need God when you have science?" If this young person only knew that without God there would be no existence, and therefore no science. For a person to make a statement such as that student made, given the state of scientific knowledge at that time, and even still today, would be somewhat akin to someone in the 1800s stating that science at that time had discovered all worthwhile knowledge in existence and that there was nothing of any significance left to discover. For those with greater understanding, that last statement is no more ridiculous than the statement made by the student about God. The more that science learns, the closer it will come to the realization that nothing can really exist without God, and that therefore all things are interrelated, even the precepts of religion and science, those of course that are based on valid premise. As science advances, researchers will eventually learn that science and manifestations of God in higher realms begin to look more and more like two sides of the same coin. Perhaps those scientists who won the 2013 Nobel Prize in Physics may have taken a significant step in this direction as a result of their findings about that which some outside the scientific community call the God particle, and which physicists call Higgs boson, a particle which apparently confers mass on other particles. According to the so-called Standard Model, suit of education that has ruled particle physics for the last half-century. The universe brims with energy that acts somewhat like a cosmic molasses, imbuing the particles that move through it with mass. This information is according to an article by Dennis Overby in the New York Times of October 8, 2013. Could this particle be doing even more than these scientists now understand? Could this energy be somehow related to the force referred to in the Star Wars series of stories, or something similar? Perhaps in time science will be able to provide the answers to these questions also. Of course, in addition to this significant discovery in the field of physics, we should also note that medicine and electronics are not the only areas that have had almost miraculous growth in recent times. Our planet is changing and shrinking very rapidly, as is demonstrated by another area where great progress has been made. That is the onset of the beginnings of space travel. Many of us have been blessed to see these changes taking place within our own lifetime. How many of us who were around at that time did not watch the early manned rocket launchings, especially those which resulted in the moon landings? with wide eyes and bated breath. One particular aspect of manned spaceflight that is extremely interesting is the speed with which the astronauts circle the globe, indeed making our planet really seem to shrink and appear to be much smaller today from that perspective. More importantly, however, another associated development has also taken place that you may be fairly certain was not foreseen by the scientists. That particular development is a significant unexpected benefit to humankind, a serendipity some might call it. It's the fact that the astronauts from any orbital mission, no matter what country they were from, could not help but notice as their craft circled our Earth again and again, that when they looked at our planet, it was the real thing. They saw that our Earth is a single entity, one planet encompassing all its residents, without map lines drawn all over it. There were none. We its people do not have separating lines and boundaries drawn all over our home planet, just over our maps and our minds and our hearts. From the vantage point of the astronauts orbiting our planet, the lines and boundaries that separate us simply disappeared. We, the people of this fragile home, must learn to erase those separating lines and boundaries from our own minds and our hearts, and, like the astronauts, see our world and our common humanity as they really are. This phenomenon that has in recent years taken place involving the Earth's astronauts will continue to have an increasingly greater impact as the seeds of these concepts take root and the ideas begin to grow. In the past, there may have been reasons, perhaps even needs for such feelings as some that are still seen today. But the time is near when there will be a far greater need for the realization of the true sense of our common humanity, and a sense of brotherhood and sisterhood among all those of humankind. A far greater sense of understanding and realization that, in fact, we are truly one. It's not being said here that one's heritage is unimportant. Our heritage is important, and it should have its rightful place in our lives. But it should not become a stumbling block that prevents us from experiencing a feeling of brotherhood or sisterhood with those who may have a different heritage. The principle is very similar to that which was taught in the Judeo-Christian Bible by the Apostle Paul in the first chapter of the first book of Corinthians, beginning at verse 12, and including the beginning of verse 13, which says, "Now this I say, that every one of you saith, I am of Paul, and I of Apollos, and I of Cephas, and I of Christ. Is Christ divided?" Also in chapter 3 of the same book, 1 Corinthians verses 4 through 10, there is similar chastisement by Paul. Today, however, in addition to the fact that we are often divided by our religious beliefs, we are also saying, I am Italian, or I am American, or I am German, or Spanish, or whatever the country may be, as if one country or heritage should be held above another, when in fact the people of all nations are God's children in spirit, and each of us has been incarnated in a great many different countries and lives past, with each incarnation having something important to contribute to the whole of the spirit of the person, just as each country and its people have something important to contribute to the whole of the planet today. We must recognize and acknowledge that in God's eyes we are all His children, and therefore, as stated earlier, we're all brothers and sisters of the same family. We're all one. If you're a parent with more than one child, then you know that even though there are differences in each of your children, both in appearance and behavior, you nevertheless love each and all of them as your own, and you know how much it saddens you to see them when they express anger or hatred one to another. Even if your children are not yet mature enough to realize the full importance of the fact that having the same father makes them brothers and sisters, making them all a part of the same family, you nevertheless do not give up trying, sometimes subtly, sometimes using sterner measures, to teach them that love, patience, tolerance, and acceptance are the ways one should express oneself to other members of the family. These important principles deserve our careful consideration, since we are all children of God, and therefore members of the same family, his family. If we truly seek to serve and please the God that has such a revered place in our hearts, then despite whatever differences we feel that we perceive among ourselves, we must strive to see ourselves as truly being the children of God, as being therefore the children of the same Father, seeing as one family, as one, and to see this planet as our home, the place where we as a family all live, and that we must learn to live together in peace and in harmony. I'm now going to move on to discuss some aspects of philosophy. There have been a number of persons over the centuries who have expressed their questions, thoughts, and ideas concerning humankind and our presence on this planet. They've stated in various ways their opinions about many of the different aspects of our lives here. Quite a number of them have asked, and some have even attempted to provide answers to many of life's questions. These are questions that over the years have puzzled the minds of thinking men and women everywhere. There was a particular period in the past, almost 2,500 years ago, when ancient Greece seemed to have a near monopoly on such thinking. A great many very significant questions, thoughts, and ideas were put into writing during that time, and thankfully, many of them are still around, as close as the local library, for our consideration today. It's been said that Plato, a Greek philosopher, may have been the first to use the term philosophy, which is described as the love of knowledge. It is easy for us to see why those of that day who loved knowledge and sought to find, through their thinking, their discussions, and their writing, answer to many of the important questions about life, why they would come to be called philosophers. The word has, over time, taken on additional connotations, such that many of the thoughts, ideas, and expressions that someone may have about life have come to be called their own personal philosophy of life. If the opportunity should present itself to read synopses of some of the writings from that early period in Greece, you're likely to find that the time it takes to do so would be time very well spent. Look carefully, and you should find that some of these writings have quietly and subtly woven the thread of a particular concept through many of their writings. That concept concerns the idea of reincarnation. Not that of humans returning as lower animal forms, but of advancing to higher levels of human spiritual development. The soul personality, through many incarnations, gradually unfolds like the petals of a rose, manifesting ever greater beauty as its innermost parts slowly become more visible, allowing the beauty of the inner person, the higher self, to become more outwardly visible as that person, through many lifetimes of right thinking, right living, and making right decisions, continues to advance and grow spiritually. As previously stated, this outward visibility should not be interpreted to necessarily mean outward physical beauty, but instead should be thought of as the beauty of the inner person showing itself outwardly in many ways, including the manifestation of a more universal kind of love, compassion, and humanitarian thinking, among other things, as a part of the life experiences of that personality. When someone from more recent times has offered their thinking, although not necessarily in the form of new ideas, since it's been said that there is nothing new under the sun, and their thoughts are regarding the problems and questions that concern our lives today, we've had a tendency to generalize this as philosophizing also. Some may call it modern philosophy, or even speaking of one's own personal philosophy of life. There are people today, however, and this speaker is among them, who believe that the relatively near future will reveal, among other things, many greatly needed philosophical thoughts and ideas regarding the nature of our lives on this planet. A significant number of these thoughts and ideas will be specifically concerned with spirituality, science, and government. Those will be ideas that have been inspired for the benefit of humankind and will, in fact, change the world as we know it. There will be a great many people, however, who will unwisely but openly oppose some of these ideas and will resist needed change with all their might. Some will do so because of greed or other selfish motives, while others will oppose the needed change because of a lack of understanding due to their having been misled over a great many years. Hundreds and hundreds of millions, however, having their minds and hearts touched by the deep wisdom within these ideas, will overwhelmingly bring about the institution of these much-needed changes. The amount of time that it will take to begin and then to implement these changes may be more or it may be less, depending on a number of different factors. But that's not as important as the fact that the changes will come, and our planet and its people will benefit greatly from them. Now that we've stepped across the threshold and have lived for a time in the 21st century, beginning a new millennium, have you given any thought to the possibility of such changes, of what they might be, and how you might reconcile them with your own philosophy of life? If not, perhaps you should give such matters some consideration, because some of the events that will eventually bring about these changes have already begun. I want to thank you for watching this video, and I now invite you to watch the next video and subsequent videos in this series. Again, thank you.